Welcome back, everyone, to another Platinum sponsor Get to Know You session, fireside chat, whatever you want to call it. This time we're with Mux. Mux were probably, I think, the very, very first Platinum sponsor that we signed up. I can't really say signed up because they came to us. So I couldn't be happier to have them here. A lot of people probably haven't heard of Mux. So I'm going to say hello to Phil and say hello, Phil. I'm going to leave you with Phil, and he's going to talk to you about Mux for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back, and we'll have a bit of a chat, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much, Phil.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for putting on ComCon. Obviously, I've been really enjoying it so far. I'm really looking forward to watching the rest of the sessions. Yeah, I guess I'll say hi. I'm Phil. I work at Mux. I've been at Mux for a little bit over 3 years now. Mux is a relatively young company. We're a San Francisco-based startup. Just coming up, I think now for 6 years. I've lost track at this point. I think it's about 6 years we're coming up for now. We specialize in a couple of areas. First product we built was a quality of experience monitoring tool for live and on-demand video streaming. And then we went and built a live and on-demand video streaming platform. Very much aimed at two different markets there. Our analytics product very much aimed at high-end media tools. This is a product that's been used on the Super Bowl for the last few years. Really gets, enables you to get deep into the experience that your users are having. And video product is, it's video for developers. It's video for a developer market, that generalized developer audience that just wants to add video to their product that works. And at the moment, that's focused in the live and on-demand streaming market. We take the approach that we want to be super interchangeable, work with every player, every the most available ingest technologies, those sorts of things. So yeah, we kind of aim ourselves developer first, so really work hard on things like documentation, the onboarding flow. But yeah, really it is for kind of any developer. This isn't a product for video developers, it's a product for any developer who wants to work in video.
Okay, so I mean, I only just started using Mux probably 2 months ago, I think, for the very, very first time. And yes, you are very developer centric. Like even when you go into your console, when you create something, you're not really clicking on a button to create something. You're doing an HTTP request, and it
Yep.
tells you like here's the JSON, and you can change the stuff. It feels very much at home for a developer. So A, excellent job, and B, I guess my first question to you would be why did you want to get involved with ComCon? I mean, a little bit of background here is ComCon traditionally has been very real-time media focused, and some people would say that Mux isn't real-time at the moment because you're video on demand, but you're live streaming. So like, are you doing real-time? Are you not doing real-time? Different people have different definitions, don't they? So yeah, historically you didn't like Mux as a company didn't really fit in with what ComCon did. So why were you so interested in getting involved this year?
No, great question, of course. You know, real time, and I say this a lot to people, but real time is kind of where video streaming was 10 years ago. We have these tools in browsers. We have WebRTC. We have, WebRTC, what, standardized only technically this year. We have these tools. We kind of finally have a way to do real time video in the browser. It's finally getting to a place where it's kind of usable and stable and not necessarily super interchangeable, but we can talk about that more later. But it feels like it did 10 years ago. You know, the browser APIs still are hit and miss between different browsers and capabilities are different. And you know, it just feels like we're super early still in that market, and you kind of just have to look at the explosion in new companies coming into the real-time space over, you know, the last 12 months. So that's 100ms, Dite, LiveKit, you know, coming into this space and really starting to push the boundaries of what we can do in, you know, the real-time space. So obviously, real-time is really important to us as a company, and we wanted to make sure that we get, you know, deeply stuck into the best communities there are involving real time as well. Obviously, we obviously run a conference called Demuxed every year as well, which obviously predates Mux by quite a while as well, which is really kind of a lot like this, but for video streaming engineers. And yeah, we really wanted to get involved in kind of, hey, what's the best sort of events for real time? And yeah, ComCon is absolutely one of those.
Cool. I mean, that's good to hear. But I mean, Mux slash Demuxed, like that was actually my first real. Like I think last year I watched some videos online, but didn't really get involved at all. This year, I was like, oh, it's live, like, and it's another virtual event, but we're coming towards the end of the pandemic, and like I was really stunned at just the quality, like the output, and everything to me about Demuxed was, this is like ComCon to me, like the quality, the AV quality, like how you're pushing forward with new ways of doing things, and not just doing things the old way, right? Everything screamed to me as, oh, these are good people, right? So when you guys said, oh yeah, we want to sponsor, I was like, yes, absolutely. So I guess my next question is to do with that intersection between real time and live stream, and from a partial outsider's perspective, looking in on real time over the past 18 to 24 months. How has it looked from the outside, from a development perspective, and what people are actually wanting to do, and maybe what they're coming to what they're using Mux for, but then kind of going, but we really want to do this, or we really want to do that. Have you had those kinds of experiences over the past 18 months?
Absolutely, and this is something that's really been at the forefront of conversations I've had with customers and partners and influencers over the last 12 months. The intersection between, I've got some real-time video, I want to broadcast it to a large audience, I'm willing to accept for our latency trade-offs there, but I want to get the highest perceptual quality I can, and usually I want to reduce costs significantly as a customer as well, and I want to kind of have a much higher reliability if possible there as well. So generally what we see is people who want to produce events in a real-time context and then broadcast them in a slightly more traditional live streaming context, and from a live stream perspective, there's kind of a pretty big difference there between the latency experiences people are going to have there. The best of breed real-time services are 100 to 200 milliseconds, and the best of breed live streaming services are a few seconds at least. It's a world that's changing rapidly, much like real-time is, but certainly a big difference in experience there, but a lot of people are willing to make that trade-off. The big question that people usually have is actually in that intersection. It's in that, well, how do I go from a real-time event to that live stream? And the question often depends on, well, like, what vendors do I have in the play? Am I buying my real time from a vendor who kind of has that functionality built in to do that composition and stream that over RTMP? And if so, great. Yep, you can just plug that kind of straight into be it a Mux or an AWS or kind of a Twitch or anything you want to plug it into. But it pretty quickly becomes more complicated than that, or at least this is how I see it. people have spent 18 months, nearly 2 years now, on and off of Zoom calls, right? I certainly have. A Zoom call is kind of boring by design in many ways, right? It's like this black background, rectangles with even something as simple as like it's got square corners on it. There's no luxury there. There's no premium feel there. There's nothing like that, right? It works well, obviously, but like from an aesthetic perspective, it like isn't pleasing. And I have a lot of conversations that really become about those aesthetics, right? And this is something that we really lean into when we do Demuxed, and you lean into when you do ComCon as well. Is like we want to make this aesthetically pleasing as well. It's not just about like a black background and some rectangles with people talking on them and a screen share. It's about, background imagery. It's about transitions, stingers. It's about kind of all of those pieces, and that's where that overlap between real time and live streaming becomes just super important. People want to be able to compose these real-time events, like well, these live streams, but using that real-time technology. But they want to be visually inspiring, and that there's a lot of events out there, and like that is honestly like one of the biggest criticisms I have had of events over the last 18 months. You go there and it really is just a webinar, right? And a lot of people might say, well, kind of there's no difference between a webinar and a conference. Surely, there's a big difference, right? And production quality becomes, a huge part of that. And we're seeing this huge rise in tool chains that let people to produce like meaningful, visually inspiring content from a tool like a browser, right? Even tools as simple as like StreamYard, Restream Studio, Streamclub. Those are tool chains that didn't exist 2 years ago, that now have become like super impressive tool chains for producing like very impressively composited content just right from a browser using real-time audio video off a WebRTC stack, and broadcasting that to potentially huge audiences. And that I think is where that intersection becomes really, really important.
That's really interesting. Like ultimately, yeah, you touched on so many good points. Like ultimately, like we as a conference decided that we wanted to pre-record everything. We did this last year as well. We pre-record absolutely everything other than the live week.
Yep.
At which point we do live intros, and then we play out the videos, and then we do live Q&A. And it's difficult to get that quality that you want, right? And people actually strive for. It's something that people have been missing. Like just joining a Zoom webinar. Well, they don't call it webinar, do they? They call it Zoom something or other. I forget, but it's a terrible experience, right? And it's the same for joining a Jitsi call, right? And sure, everyone can join us on Jitsi and then like output it to YouTube, but there's no pizzazz, right? There's nothing keeping me engaged. Like the content has to drive it completely and utterly. And unfortunately, we're all very much used to going to conferences and them being top-notch quality conferences, and suddenly everyone's got Zoom or Jitsi or whatever, and there's no pizzazz about it. And I think that's why a lot of people have got very, very bored of virtual conferences, because there's nothing kind of driving people to go, oh yeah, really want to watch this. Because we all look at Zoom all day, and we all look at Slack, and we all like that is what we've been doing, and we want something a bit different, right? Something I'm not sure if I told you is we're actually using Mux this week for the live conference. Okay. So we're actually using so everyone we're pre-recording this, so like
spoiler.
Obviously Phil has been watching the whole thing this week, but we're actually streaming out to 3 places concurrently. So we're outputting to YouTube just for historical, so that we don't have to upload stuff after the event. It's just there. We're uploading to Mux, but we're also uploading to Millicast.
Nice.
So that way, and hopefully people have been doing this all week, but people should be able to switch between a Mux stream and a Millicast stream. Ooh. and see the differences. And there's pros and cons to both, right? Like there's nothing bad about an HLS stream that is a bit delayed.
No,
and there's nothing bad about a millicast stream that you can have within 100 milliseconds or whatever,
of course.
depending on where you are in the world. I think I'm hopeful that people will find the intersection interesting from a technology perspective. So hopefully in the Q&A, hopefully everyone will turn around and go, yeah, Dan, it works really, really well. But hopefully future Dan will be really happy, and past Dan will be okay with whatever has happened. So I think that leads us to a good point for doing some live Q&A. So I think I'm going to say goodbye. Phil's going to say goodbye.
Bye bye,
and we'll move over to live Q&A and get some questions from you lot. So thank you very much for watching this get to know you session with Mux. Thank you very much to Phil for joining me, and we shall all see you in a minute.
Thanks, Dan.
Hello, everyone. It's me again. So you haven't seen me in this session yet, apart from 5 seconds ago when it was a pre-recorded video. But I'm here with Phil from Mux. Mux is one of our platinum sponsors. So say hello, Phil.
Hello, Phil. I had to.
Hello, Phil. we were just having a bit of fun off camera, and Phil's completely and utterly distracted me, and he's a bad influence. But that is what ComCon is all about, having a bit of fun and being a bit different. So we spoke an awful lot during that chat that we had about why Mux was interested in sponsoring this event that you hadn't really heard of before, but and so we don't really need to rehash that. The question that I would like to pose is what is your favorite file format? Ashley asked this question, and now I have to ask it because that is what an MC does.
What is my favorite file format? Oh man, it's an interesting question. Maybe a callback to what codec should I use? And the answer is obviously the QuickTime codec, which is QuickTime is not a codec, but my favorite file format, I'm a big fan of ISO BMFF, fragmented MP4. One of my earliest, the first talk I ever gave at a Demuxed conference was just like this exploration into the MP4 file format, which is really good fun, and how that's evolved over years from actually, yes, the QuickTime file format through to, ISO BMFF, fragmented MP4, CMAF. CMAF wasn't even really a thing when I gave that talk, interestingly, but is now. But yeah, I love it. It's a declarative box-based file format. It's really easy to parse, really easy to deal with. I love MP4. Less of a fan of transport streams, wasteful in modern video delivery, but yeah, that's a fascinating question. But yeah, I love the MP4 file format.
Okay. I mean, that completely went over my head. I don't deal with containers or anything like that. Just send some VP8 and VP9, and that's about it. So Ashley says that she likes this. Thank you, Phil. So I'm glad we could get down to the nitty gritty questions. So I guess what do you see coming in 2022? Getting to some serious questions now. Not that file formats aren't serious, but what do you see as like 2022? We're moving towards hopeful changes. People moving more hybrid, that kind of stuff. What are you most excited about coming into 2022 versus what we've kind of had to live with over the past 2 years and all the changes that have happened over the past 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. 2022 is going to be a fascinating year across the world in general, but also the video industry especially. I think we'll see huge, the starts of at least huge changes in 2022. This world where we've moved from in-person events by default with maybe a live stream to entirely online events, then started to move back towards hybrid events, and then, now we've got Omicron. Hey, this is live. We can, actually, Omicron wasn't a thing when we had hit that recording. That maybe dates it a little bit. But, moving into a world where we're probably going to have like rolling variants of this thing for a while yet. So, I think every event will have to start planning for some form of hybrid slash online, and, online equal and that sort of thing, because I think different regions will get affected differently across next year by different variants. So like maybe your local attendees can come and attend events a lot more, whereas your remote attendees might, depending on their country or their region, might be experiencing lockdowns or might have other travel things. Like I'm supposed to be in California right now, but obviously with everything that's going on, it's a little more challenging. And I think we'll see a lot of flex over the next year because of that. From a technology standpoint, I think 2022 is about refining the WebRTC standard to me. It still is mind-boggling to me that we only ratified WebRTC in 2021. Technology that's been around for a long time and is a collection of a lot of older technologies as well. But 2022 gives us this opportunity to refine it and hopefully look at things like greater interoperability and getting to a place where we can tune WebRTC for different use cases, right? WebRTC today in most implementations, particularly browser implementations, makes a lot of trade-offs for latency. I would love to see a world where we can tune for slightly higher latency, but more higher perceptual quality, slightly more frames in the buffer. When we're trying to truly optimize the absolute latency, we might only be holding a few frames, which makes us very sensitive to like jitter and packet loss and reordering and that sort of thing. Whereas if we get to a place where we can start to really tune all ends of what we're doing, if we make a trade-off to say 500 milliseconds latency, maybe we can actually get ahead of a lot more of, packet loss, jitter, reordering, those sorts of things to make sensible trade-offs against latency, quality, all those sorts of things. So I think refining the standard to get to those places and refining the implementations of the standard to get to those sorts of places will be really exciting.
Cool. That kind of ties into my next kind of question around hybrid then, because as people are moving potentially more towards hybrid events, do you see there's a greater need for Mux's kind of ultra low latency stuff that you guys do and we're using on the website right now? Do you see a need for that to kind of be able to come down a bit more, but not as much as WebRTC today does?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a massive future for both kind of more traditional HTTP chunk delivery standards and more real-time oriented standards, WebRTC oriented standards. For the foreseeable future, there's always going to be a big cost trade-off to going to a real-time-esque standard. And I don't think that's going away in the next year or the next 2 years even. We have commodity CDNs. They do a very good job of cost efficiency trade-offs. We have lent heavily into that historically, and we can still get further on the latency that the chunk delivery standards have. Realistically, we try and use open standards wherever possible, which means that our low latency implementation is Apple's low latency HLS, one of the earlier kind of open implementations of LLHLS. You can jump in, anyone can sign up for a Mux account and get an LLHLS stream. But that standard, I was there with Apple on site a few times, refining that standard, working with Roger and Will and those people to refine the standard and get it to a place where it delivers well on latency and performance and reliability and scalability, all those sorts of things. Our implementation probably has a couple of seconds we can shave off it, ultimately. But I think getting that standard below 2.5, maybe 3 seconds is going to be hard. Which is interesting because when you compare that to standards like low latency Dash and the approaches that Twitch take with chunk transfer, that's pretty comparable. You can maybe push those technologies a little bit lower. I've certainly seen implementations that get down to 1.8, 1.9 seconds on chunk transfer mode. But below that, I just don't think there's any, meat left on the bone, really, in those standards to tune down lower, which means that, below that kind of 2 second boundary, we're going to be in a WebRTC world. And that's why I think it's really important we have both, because a real-time world where we're using WebRTC and those sorts of standards will exist for the real-time interactions and hyper-low latency interactions, but then, as soon as you get to a large audience, but you can get to 2 seconds, you really probably want to make that cost optimization to trade off onto, a HTTP chunk transfer based solution. So I think both have huge futures, but the really exciting thing is the overlap between the two, right? Moving between a real-ish time experience, a 150 millisecond experience, and that couple of second experience. Getting that kind of transition perfect is probably the most important thing in the next kind of couple of years.
This is where web transport and web codecs are going to be really quite interesting, but at the same time not, because web transport is going to be a thing by itself, and web codecs are going to be a thing by itself. But ultimately, the thing that gets implemented over them is going to be proprietary, probably, right? Probably. And so ultimately, there's no reusing stuff. Yeah. And so we're back into this land of we've got this really great stuff in HLS, Dash, whatever. We've got WebRTC, and then we've got these new technologies that are being driven by people like Zoom and because they want greater control. But ultimately it's going to end up being probably a bad thing for the open ecosystem, because we're going to have silo after silo after silo. And unfortunately, it ultimately won't. Ultimately, it will be good for the likes of Zoom, because they'll be able to do what they want to do, and they're currently sending media over the data channel and whatever else. They won't have to do that, and they won't have to do that anymore. Yeah. But for companies and projects that want to use the open ecosystem that is what they're using today, that's still going to be that tough middle ground. Yeah. So I completely get what you're saying. Like we've got these two lands, and we kind of want to get into the middle of both of them. Yep. We want to be able to get to the benefits of both of them. And at the moment, web transport and web codec might be really good for that going forward potentially, but we need something else to come in. And it's kind of talking about WIP. There were a couple of talks about WIP yesterday for WebRTC, and that's such a great thing, because suddenly we've got this standard around how we're signaling WebRTC for doing a specific thing. Yeah. And we kind of need the same thing potentially when it comes to web transport, web codecs, or that middle ground, whatever that middle ground is.
Could not agree more. I'm a big fan of WIP. It's interesting. In many ways, not to criticize WebRTC at all, one of the biggest headaches with WebRTC has been the lack of standardization on signaling, right? Like, everyone has a signaling protocol, none of it's interchangeable. And we talked so many times about, hey, what would it mean to make the video JS of WebRTC? It's well, you kind of can't, right? You have completely arbitrary signaling protocols on every end of it. There's no, you can say it works with WebRTC, but all of that other stuff in the middle, all the signaling, or the exchange, or the SDP handling, that's something that is proprietary to every single platform. So that has been something that has been, really frustrating and challenging. And ultimately that has caused the fragmentation in that ecosystem, and probably arguably, a lot of people wanting to split off into web transport and web codecs and that sort of thing.
And it's kind of held the whole... there are big pros to not having a standardized signaling layer, but then it's held back a lot of good stuff as well, because there are companies that go, well, we can't interoperate, and we can't do broadcast, and we can't do this, and we can't do that. So there's big pros and there's big cons, and hopefully WIP is the start of something in terms of we can do this and we can do that, and then hopefully we'll continue kind of creating these mini standards around. Well, WIP's not a standard yet, but hopefully moving forward there'll be more of these kind of mini standards around. We want to do this specific thing. We want to do that specific thing.
Completely. Absolutely. I really hope so. I'm, yeah, really bullish on Whip and excited to see more adoption of it as well. So
Cool. Well, I mean, we're at the end of our time for getting to know Mux. So I want to say thank you again to Mux for being a platinum sponsor. It really means a lot. The day, I think I said this in the video earlier, the day that Mux turned around and said, "Yeah, we want to be platinums," I was like completely and utterly taken aback because I hadn't really had anything to do with Mux at that point. And so for a company to come and go, we believe in what you're trying to do, it really means something. So thank you very, very much. And I think that's it for this session. And so we'll be back in a minute for another session. If you're watching on demand, you should, on YouTube, you should absolutely like and subscribe because it's how we get to do extra stuff. So I'm going to say thank you to Phil. And Phil's going to say thank you, Dan.
thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for putting together this event. It's really great. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you. And we shall see everyone in just a moment on the other side.